Welcome to Charles Dickens' A Brain on Fire, a series that digs deep into the life and works of one of the greatest novelists of all time. Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of our examination of the mystery of Edwin Drood. Returning, as promised, is the inimitable Dr. Pete Orford. Last September, in part 1, our focus was on seeing Dickens's last unfinished novel as an incomplete whole. In today's episode, the floodgates of conspiracy burst open as writers, academics and enthusiasts across time seek to fill in the missing blanks of what Dickens intended to write next. Pete's book, Edwin Drood, Charles Dickens's unfinished novel and our endless attempts to end it, published by Pen and Sword Books, is our guide throughout. It is a hugely entertaining read, where scholarly citations and tomfoolery combine with vibrant illustrations by Alice Jones. There is a link to purchase this in the description. And, reading extracts today, it is an honour to welcome the fantastic actors Joseph Chance and Dan Wheeler. Together, they are part of a quartet known as the Apocalypse Players, an award-winning podcast where role-playing and improvisation combine to create immersive stories for eager listeners each week. I urge you to follow the link in the description to them as well. Oh, and for this episode, I also asked some AI to try and write an ending to Edwin Drood, with some truly astonishing results, especially in reference to the character of Deputy, that hideous small boy who throws stones at everyone. The AI sections are also digitally voiced by a generator with a sampled Australian accent. Given the soap opera nature of the material, this felt appropriate. Pete, hello and welcome to part 2 of our examination of the mystery of Edwin Drood. I'm holding here, the listeners can't see, but you can vouch for me, I'm holding up your book, The Mystery of Edwin Drood, Charles Dickens' unfinished novel and our endless attempts to end it. I'm looking forward to talking about many of the endless attempts, including one that has been brought to the table for our chat, where I asked some AI to try and write the ending to the story as well, with some very interesting results. I mean, first of all, how were you affected by all the theories when you're looking into it?
I think it's very strange reading more than one. So in the book, I talk about completions and solutions, okay? So for me, a solution is when someone, it's like fan theory. So your idea is what would happen. Whereas a completion is someone's actually taken the time to write out a whole story or adaptation, actually, dramatized it, done the whole work. And the completions are more interesting because that's where you get all the other details in there as well as just the big questions answered. But each of those completions is trying to say, this is it. For all you fans, here's a second half. And it's strange then reading more than one because you start to kind of go, which one's this one again? And you lose track of them all as well. So there's a few points reading through, and I really did start to kind of question: is this even in Dickens' original? Am I, what day is this? What's going on? It's a deep dive when you get into it, and so one of the things I wanted to do was to try to find a way to encourage others to look at the broad overview of solutions and not feel put off, not feel it's too much as well, and just get a sense of actually how we as people have responded to this story over the last century and a half and how we keep responding as well. It's a really nice testament to human creativity. And so often reading is seen as a one-way street. But there's the book, you read it. And we don't really appreciate what the reader is doing, the creative process we do when we read a book as well. And so having the ending left blank really crystallizes and encourages the idea of the reader reading back, putting their own ideas in there as well. And I like that. I like the idea of us responding back to Dickens.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly engagingly written, and it's so fun to just let yourself be swamped with lots of different theories, isn't it? Even though a lot of them are very silly, I think. But is it right that I've read this right, that in the early stages of the book, you focus on the period of 1870 to 1885, so the first 15 years after Dickens dying, and that's the main phase of completions being written, is that?
That's right, yeah. So the initial stage of what I've called the opportunists are people who they're not trying to solve Drood. They're not trying to find the definitive ending. They are just saying, here you go, here's a book. read ours. It's about just giving a story. So they're not trying to create what Dickens intended. They're just going, here's an interesting idea for how it could end. But actually, they have a lot of common with other pirated stories that came out in Dickens's lifetime. So when Dickens hated this when he was alive, you had things like George Reynolds wrote Pickwick Abroad, like a whole other story about Pickwick going to Europe, written by another author while Dickens is still alive. And of course, no copyright. Dickens could do nothing about this, and everyone loved it. That idea of intellectual property didn't exist. So a lot of people in Dickens's lifetime were taking these characters and writing new adventures. And so these early ones for Drood are really just more of that same idea of let's just write the most Dickensy story we can. How can we invent new characters who sound like Dickens characters? So Dr. Chippercoin is a work of genius. This is in Orford's book in 1871. That's beautiful. That's top tier Dickens naming. Yeah.
Yes, they've got some great titles. I've got here the Cloven Foot,
Yep.
John Jasper's Secret, the Wellfleet Mystery. But the best one, my favourite, is just called The Mystery of Edwin Drood. Complete. A great mystery solved. That's quite some boast, isn't it?
Oh, that's the one. That's 1874. That's a guy called Thomas Power James who says, I haven't written this book. I am just simply a conduit for Dickens's ghost who's told me how the story ends. And you think, that is a hell of a flex, man. That is an almighty sales pitch.
Part second of The Mystery of Edwin Drood, by the spirit pen of Charles Dickens through a medium. Chapter 26. What the Organ Said. The choir has taken its departure. The choir leader has not taken his departure, but remains after the others have gone, as is his wont at times. Only the bellow boys keeping him company. He is seated before the organ now, and plays one of those sublime sonatas of Beethoven's. He appears lost in the sweetness of the harmony which his own hands produce. He fancies that the air is filled with sweet voices. Anon, when the melody breaks out in more sonorous chords, he feels that a presence of something is standing near him, and, with voice whose tones are like the moaning of the winds, murmurs a name. The name of Edwin Drood. Still he plays on, seeing naught but the instruments before him, while the melody still proceeds from its 100 throats.
It's trying to create the same tone and atmosphere of a Dickens novel.
Yes. From any of these early completions, were there any aspects that were plausible that actually you thought, oh, actually that could be right? I think, because the way I'm thinking, looking at all of this, is the focus is so much about what happens to Edwin that we don't really think very much about all the other characters that obviously have their own journeys to play out. And I just wondered if in amongst that there were any plausible...
So this is why completions, I think, are more interesting, because when we talk about solution, we talk about theory. Like you say, we look at, is Edwin alive or dead? And who marries who? And we just focus on that. And that's not what Dickens is about. With the greatest respect to Dickens, the plot is is secondary to characterization and narrative. So when you try and actually write a story in the style of Dickens or Dickens's Ghost, actually you've got to think about all the other minor characters too. And so what's nice is when you see comic scenes coming in there and just enjoying the moment rather than charging ahead to figure out if Edwin's alive or dead. It's interesting. You mentioned the Cloven Foot. This is the very first one. And again, it's something that started while Dickens was alive. So it's a parody. The whole thing's a parody. It's an American author who is rewriting Edwin Drood as it's published. So coming over, the Atlantic, he's getting the numbers from Dickens and he's rewriting them as this new parody set in America. And it's mocking everything. And then Dickens dies, and it's like, I've got to finish it myself now. I don't want to parody anymore. And what's funny is, this is, his name is Thomas Kerr. He just says, well, it's obvious how it ends. Clearly, Jasper did it, and Basil is Datchery. And that's it. Anticlimax. But so that initial idea of this being literature's greatest mystery isn't there yet.
That is really interesting. There's a pastiche, a parody that I absolutely love that I found in the middle of your book, which is the mysterious mystery of rude Edwin. And you've got that printed in your book, and it's in April 1870. And I just love that opening parody of the opening chapter of Edwin Drood about the clock tower with its eye out and all of that stuff.
The well-known clock at Westminster, standing on its head with its feet in hot water. But then you know what the bear said. Why did he want the soap? Therein lies the mystery. Won't 50 billion dancing dervishes do as well? If not, let's go in for white elephants. Confound the clock! Why won't it stand the right way up? Why don't it strike? I'll strike it if it don't. Aha! It isn't a clock after all, but an old woman in a frilled nightcap. And I'm lying one of 4 in bed and feel very particularly uncomfortable.
But ain't that rather disconnected?
Asked Judy. Isn't it powerful, though? Said the great author.
Oh, very.
Said Judy. And the great author proceeded.
So this is a parody of the first installment when it first comes out. And the joke of it is saying it's just like every other Dickens novel. So at one point they go, hello, my name is Sapsy, not Pecksniff. I'm Sapsy, I'm different. But the joke is, oh, God, it's more of the same. They're not seeing this as his new dark Gothic novel with a mysterious ending.
Yes, it really shows how contemporary readers are wise to Dickens. There's a perception, I think, that Victorian readers are less sophisticated and they're more sentimental. All Dickens's traits and everything, people were aware of them at the time and were parodying them.
Absolutely. The bottom line is Dickens is a really popular author in his time. We know, all of us, don't we, in our own lifetime, any celebrity now who's popular is going to have an army of fans and an army of people who absolutely loathe them, all the more because they're popular. Again, that lack of reverence yet. When you get to June 1870 and he dies, I've compared it at one point to when the Queen died here in England, like last year. You can't say a thing. Everyone must show their respect. And it was like that with Dickens. And so in the midst of that sense of, oh my God, he's dead, you're left with this last unfinished story, and it becomes radically reimagined in the idea of being Dickens's last novel. That we can't mock this anymore. We can't knock it down. It has to be his final gift to us.
Something else that's so interesting that your book shows is it 4 people that Dickens, in his life, while he's alive, talks to and mentions the ending of the plot to. Would you tell us a bit about that? Because that's so interesting. And it's amazing how quickly those 4 witnesses, as you describe them, are completely dispensed with and become unreliable. So who are the witnesses and how are they made unreliable, apparently?
So the main guy, of course, is John Forster. Once again, Dickens' trusted friend and literary advisor. They share ideas. Then there's the illustrators, 2 illustrators. Charlie Collins, Dickens' son-in-law, who draws the cover illustration. And then there's the final illustrator who comes down the main drawings. That's Luke Files. And he, again, later comes out and says, I asked Dickens about the scarf isn't important. And Dickens says, yes, he uses it to murder Edwin. And then Charles Dickens' own son, Charles Dickens Jr., also remembers going out for a walk with Dickens and saying, is Edwin dead? And Dickens going, well, yes, obviously. Duh. And so a few things here. One thing is that all these reports, although they're contemporary, don't come out until later. It's as you get more theories that people go, well, actually, 10 years ago, Dickens told me this. So you get that ambiguity of, well, are you sure you're remembering it right? Either you're not remembering it correctly, you're misinterpreting what Dickens has said, he's being sarcastic, or Dickens was lying to you. There's no evidence or precedent for him doing that, but what you've got happening here now, our second phase, the detectives. And the detectives wanted to be the great mystery. And this is coinciding with that point at which the people who knew Dickens personally are becoming less and less because they're dying too. And so there's a new type of Dickens expert, and that's the person who knows the books. Suddenly, people are going, I've read Edwin Drood, and I understand Dickens, and I, and only I, know what happens. And so when you're saying stuff like that, it's really inconvenient to have people who actually knew Dickens saying, actually, he told me this. Like, oh, no, shh, shh, shh. Academics talking here. No, not now, not that. And so the one who gets the greatest attack here is John Forster, which is remarkable because John Forster, Dickens' lifelong friend, trusted advisor, and when he writes his biography, and this is the third and final volume that comes out in 1874.
The story, I learnt immediately afterward, was to be that of the murder of a nephew by his uncle. The last chapters were to be written in the condemned cell, to which his wickedness, all elaborately elicited from him as if told of another, had brought him. Discovery by the murderer of the utter needlessness of the murder for its object was to follow hard upon commission of the deed, but all discovery of the murderer was to be baffled till towards the close, when, by means of a gold ring which had resisted the corrosive effects of the lime into which he had thrown the body, not only the person murdered was to be identified, but the locality of the crime and the man who committed it. So much was told to me before any of the book was written.
So Forster says, John Jasper did it, Rosa will marry Tartar, Neville will die in the capturing of Jasper, and Edwin, of course, is dead. So there's quite a lot of detail there of what's going to happen. And you think people go, hurrah, thank you, Forster. But they're like, no, we don't like that. That's too obvious. You're wrong. And they start to attack. And this is where you get this idea coming in that Dickens and Forster are not as close at the end as they were at the beginning, because it's a convenient narrative that allows us to use the early books as authoritative and ignore the later volumes of Forster's biography as less authoritative. Dickens's daughter, Kate, says, this is ridiculous. You all trust Forster for everything else, but not on this one single point. It makes no sense. But it's an inconvenient narrative from Forster. People don't like it because, so far as they're concerned, it's obvious. And one of the big problems that Edwin Drood as a story faces is it is called the mystery of Edwin Drood. Everyone thinks, it's a mystery. There must be a twist. It must be a great twist. No. But that idea takes hold. And so now the danger is, if we're saying it is that kind of mystery, and if the ending is what Forster says, that's not a twist, and therefore it would be, by those standards, a bad ending. And I hate that because Edwin Drood is a damn good story. You know, it's a really well-written story. I like it a lot.
Just talking about what does actually happen, according to Dickens's, what Dickens said, the scarf that's used to strangle Edwin, it occurred to me, and I hadn't thought of this before our first part, that, of course, when Edwin goes to meet Grewgious, he's literally choking, isn't he, with the scarf wrapped around his throat because of the fog.
Yeah.
And that seems to me like another signal towards Edwin's fate.
Absolutely.
How do you do, Mr. Edwin? Oh, dear me, you're choking.
It's this fog,
returned Edwin.
And it makes my eyes smart, like cayenne pepper.
Is it really so bad as that? Pray, undo your wrappers. It's fortunate I have so good a fire. Pray be seated in my chair. No, I beg. Edwin took the easy chair in the corner, and the fog he had brought in with him, and the fog he took off with his greatcoat and neck shawl, was speedily licked up by the eager fire.
You're meant to know who's done it. That's not the mystery. The suspense, the thrill, is seeing the guilty person. It's leading toward the obvious conclusion, but you want to see it play out. You want to see what Jasper does with it. But again, as far as in the early 20th century, the detectives just think, well, this is not good enough. We need a twist. So this is when you now get all the other theories. A lot of fascination about Dick Datchery, because that's one thing that Forster does not say, who is Dick Datchery. So that remains a mystery even now. And so that becomes a very popular topic to discuss. There are people who suggest that it is Edwin himself come back pretending to be dead, or that it is Helena Landless as a cross-dressing heroine, which is a very interesting idea too. and also, of course, the idea that Edwin is not dead after all, but he is alive and in hiding.
Yeah, I've fallen down that hole a little bit sometimes. I can imagine Edwin as, a bit like in Measure for Measure, Edwin as the Duke of Dark Corners coming back to condemn Jasper like the Duke does for Angelo,
Yeah.
But then you've got to return to what's actually there in front of you and not get too excited. So anything Shakespeare you may have learned from the previous episode, I'm off. I'm straight there. So Helena Landless as a cross-dressing twin. Yeah, that's fine. That happens in disguise. Yeah, she disguises herself as a... Yeah, it totally makes sense. I do believe that Dickens is Dick Datchery, though. I think
that is it. There are some theories that that's true as well.
Not only the anagram, which is very close that we talked about last time, but also the detail of him just practicing and seeming to practice in front of the mirror, looking himself in the mirror like Dickens would when he wrote his own characters out, looking in the mirror and setting it down. Just
go back to Shakespeare, just for you, Dominic. Also, again, the other ththing we haven't had yet is the Banquo's ghost scene. Obviously, that's a key moment in Macbeth as well. So would we have that in Edwin Drood? And the cover suggests it, because you do have this image of what appears to be Jasper holding a torch, looking at a figure in white. And a lot of people are saying, well, that is Edwin Return. It could be, or it could be someone masquerading as Edwin, or it could be Jasper imagining Edwin. But there does seem to be a planned moment of Jasper confronting his own guilt here, just like Macbeth and Banquo. So I think that would have been yet another Macbeth reference had it gone on.
Gosh, wow. And I can imagine if that scenario set up, I would imagine that it would be someone in disguise as Edwin.
Yeah, to prompt the confession, yeah.
So thank you for that tangent. Thank you so much. I had to get that off my chest. But you'll be pleased to know that I think I've been quite mature with this, following your book and seeing how you've reasoned everything out. I'm on a good path here. But
Okay.
But the detectives are very interesting because amongst them is Arthur Conan Doyle, which is extraordinary, isn't it? I'm just always astonished to think of Conan Doyle being a spiritualist because he's so famous for a character that's so rational. I mean, did he really swear by that? Did he really believe that he had contacted Dickens?
Yeah, it's in the... I think the guy he used to contact the ghost was also a violinist, so it's a very strange circle. But yeah, they did. They contacted Dickens's ghost, and it's very short, 2-3 answers, and that was it.
From the Glasgow Herald, Monday 5th of September 1927. Sir Arthur also related an experience he had with the spirit of Charles Dickens when it came through at a séance. He realised the presence of Dickens when a medium spelled out backwards the words, "Boz is buzzing about." Answering the question, was Edwin Drood dead? The spirit said,
"No, he was not. I was sorry to go across before I got him out of his troubles. The poor chap had a hard time."
Asked if the American medium who finished Edwin Drood in 1873 was inspired, the spirit replied,
"Not by me. Wilkie C. would have done it better. Edwin is alive, and Chris is hiding him."
And then the next thing that I find really extraordinary is the trial of John Jasper, which still comes under the detective phase in 1914 of all years as well, which is amazing also. What on earth happened there?
So yeah, 1914, trial of John Jasper. So this is the fairly new Dickens Fellowship. It was formed in 1902, I believe. They arranged to have a public trial of John Jasper. And two things remarkable about this. One is the amount of interest it got. I mean, before it even happened, which was January 1914, it was being talked about in the international press. Like, this is coming up soon. In London, there's a Dickens, trial of John Jasper. You're like, wow, people are really invested in this. So as a PR event, it's a huge success. And what they do is, I mean, obviously they've got actors playing the parts of the characters, but they invite scholars, druidists, and writers to form the solicitors, the barristers, the jury, the legal team, the judge. And so you end up with some prominent scholars alongside authors like G.K. Chesterton, who's the judge, and George Bernard Shaw, who's on the jury. And it's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. There's no script. There's no plan. It's just, let's get together and discuss this. And so no one knows what the night's going to be. Is it theatre? Is it a conference? And Chesterton thinks it's a whole joke. He just laughs the whole thing off. George Bernard Shaw isn't meant to be there. And they spend the whole time making jokes. It lasts about 4 hours. The audience is like, oh my God, we just want to go home now. We don't care anymore. We know. And people who are expecting theatre find it a bit monotonous. And people who are expecting a serious academic discussion find it too frivolous. And so no one's happy by the end of it. And the final kind of conclusion is where Chesterton, as judge, says, I find you all in contempt of court, and throws it out without a verdict. That's the worst thing you could do.
My decision is that everybody here, except myself, be committed for contempt of court. Off you all go to prison without any trial whatever.
The court rose at 11:35, the actual hearing having occupied 4 hours and 20 minutes.
And George Bernard Shaw just keeps on just chipping in, doesn't he? Just as a member of the jury, he chips in and just takes the piss the entire time, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
On this point, the witness has made a very remarkable statement, that Mr. Grewgious shook Mr. Drood together. May I ask how many pieces Drood was in?
You get 2 more trials in America where they try to do it properly. They get actual legal professionals to be on the jury. And again, it's back to what I was saying about that need for authority. If we can't get Dickens's version, if we can't trust his friends, if Holmes is unavailable, let's do it by a recognized legal system. And that will again give an authoritative ending. And you think, it's a work of fiction. Evidence and facts don't apply here in the same way because the evidence could be wrong. I mean, the biggest example is that Dickens talks about quicklime as something that dissolves, and it doesn't. It preserves. So Dickens's science is wrong in the story. So we can't apply a forensic eye to the story because we're not allowing for the fact that Dickens himself might make mistakes. It's bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers. Okay, after the detectives, the next major phase then is the academics who come in. And this is Edwin Wilson.
So that's you. That's you, isn't it? Do they speak for you? Do they speak for you in this phase?
Well, okay, fine, I'm an academic. But no, what they do is it's Wilson who says, what if the ending is obvious? What if Jasper did do it? But what if it's still a good story regardless?
I agree with that.
Yeah, and so that's mind-blowing. People go, oh, okay. And so it's Wilson who starts to say things like, what if what we're looking at here is an early modernist novel? What if we're looking at a study of the villain in Jasper? And we're not meant to be shocked by the ending, but rather we are watching this one man's descent into madness and guilt. And so with that, suddenly we can have our cake and eat it. We can believe Forster, but also say it's a good story. And you get then ideas about Jasper having a split personality and that more psychological aspect coming in.
John Jasper has then 2 states of consciousness. He is, in short, what we have come to call a dual personality.
On the principle that if I hide my watch when I am drunk, I must be drunk again before I can remember where, it will be necessary, in order to extort his confession, to find access to that state of consciousness.
Evidently not the one with which he meets the cathedral world.
So then you get this 4th phase, and this is what I've called the irreverent. And this is this moment of, okay, fine, we're pretty sure we know what Dickens intended. What if we don't care and we just write what we want to write instead and just go with it? That's very liberating. It's fan fiction, but it's much more creative. So, I mean, the big landmark moment with that is Rupert Holmes' musical, which we have to talk about because it's glorious. This is the Broadway musical of the 1980s where you get to choose the ending as the audience. And I love that. So the whole thing is done where it's a play being performed by Victorian actors. There's a lot of confusion. At the end of it, they say in the interval, right, everyone, you choose now. We're going to say Edwin's dead. Who's killed him? Who is the Gatchery? And who marries who? And they say in the play, don't go for the obvious answer. Have some fun. And people do. I think they said for the entire initial Broadway run, no one ever said that Jasper was the murderer. Boring. So you got all these other theories instead. And you'd have the idea of Deputy marrying Princess Puffer, as a romance too. So let's just go deliberately go off the market. And I think there's about 247 possible endings to that show. So all these songs they learn, just in case they're the murderer that night, It was gloriously anarchic, that idea of let's actually celebrate the uncertainty. Let's not try to solve it. Let's celebrate that it can't be solved.
Yes, although it probably confirms many academics' worst suspicions that you can't trust actors with this stuff.
I'm very jealous of that. Rather than having to go, this is the absolute truth, here's my evidence, here's my footnotes, going, well, let's just go for it, you know.
I have to say, in your book, you definitely do that, because unless I read this wrong, is there a moment where Columbo interviews Helena Landless, or a Columbo-type figure?
Yes.
You must explain these to us, because there are these fantastic little moments where you pluck out a character and you get inside their heads and you reimagine what they're saying and thinking. And
I poured myself a bourbon and let her talk on. Turns out she was quite the amateur detective down in Cloisterham. Been asking questions and poking her nose around for some time. I figured she had maybe a personal stake in all this. Hey, what's a nice girl like you doing in a case like this? You got a fella?
I don't see that's relevant, Detective.
Sure, it's relevant. You gonna marry this Edwin guy like they say? What about Chris Sparkle? Maybe even Jasper? Her eyes glowed fire at me. I figured it was a good time to move the conversation on.
It was great fun to write. So yeah, there's a lot of references in there to Sherlock Holmes. Batman gets reference in there as well. It's so easy to get snooty and critical. I didn't want to be just the academic observing. I wanted to throw my hat in the ring as well, make myself open to ridicule, to make it clear that any mockery in the book is lovingly done from one peer to another.
yeah, and not only that, I mean, you do that with words, but also in the book is the artist, Alice Jones. And the picture book, I don't know, what do you call those books? Is it just
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a comic strip. It's
a comic strip? How have I lost the phrase comic strip in this 30-degree heat wave? How did that happen? Thank you.
So early in the stage of writing this, I was doing some online projects too. And so I wanted to make it interesting and multimedia. And so I did reach out to Alice, who's an artist, to draw up illustrations of the characters and to do summaries of the plot. And so when the book came out, I thought I want to get those in print in the book as well, because it's in some cases, some of those characters have never been illustrated in the original story, and really interesting to be involved with an artist exploring that. And one of the nice and very unexpected legacies of this is that now in Rochester, aka Cloisterham, by Eastgate House, aka the Nun's House, there's a cafe. And the owner said, we're going to call it Miss Twinkleton's Cafe, after Miss Twinkleton, the owner of the Nun's House. And they contacted me and said, could we please use your illustration of Miss Twinkleton as our cafe logo? And I was like, well, I'll check with the artist. And she was like, absolutely. And so now you go to Rochester, and there is Miss Twinkleton's Cafe with the illustration by Alice as the image there of Twinkleton. And that's never planned that to happen. But, with Drood, anything goes.
So I was just messing around with some AI, and I asked it to write 2 versions of the ending of Edwin Drood, and I got a chapter of the discovery of Edwin's body, and I got Jasper's confession, and I sent them to you, and I'd love to know what you think. I mean, I think they're hilarious.
I mean, what's interesting is the first one was a bit boring, actually. It's like, come on, AI, do better than that. Jasper did it, Edwin's dead. Oh, no, this is the first one where Edwin's alive and comes back. That great reveal as well of Edwin coming back to give his final judgment on Jasper there as well. So here it says, it's a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked obsession and the strength of love and friendship. So this come back again, the idea of how this one mystery affects everyone else. I like that idea a lot, because that has in many ways rung true. How this one story has constantly echoed and re-echoed.
Yes. I think the context for this one is that the whole town is basically inside the cathedral at midnight. So something would have had to have brought them there, which is odd. I don't know how that's set up, but Edwin suddenly appears.
As the clock struck midnight, the doors of the cathedral swung open, revealing a figure standing in the doorway. It was Edwin Drood, alive and well, his face etched with determination.
And then Jasper appears.
Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the back of the cathedral. It was John Jasper, his face contorted with rage and desperation. He lunged forward, his eyes wild with fury, but was quickly restrained by the strong arms of the townspeople.
One interesting plot thread is that Edwin and Rosa appear to get back together.
Edwin and Rosa, their love stronger than ever, found solace in each other's arms.
But what's interesting about the AI is that obviously it's plucking sources and comments from everywhere, from us, from people. So it's odd that some of these ideas rise to the top.
Edwin and Rosa. Okay.
Well, I mean, there's one bit that is quite powerful. We didn't talk about so much last time, is Edwin's regret over... He weeps for losing Rosa, doesn't he? Even though they both agree that's the right decision, he weeps because he never really saw her for who she really was. And he does feel a loss and a pang, but I think he's very keen on Helena, isn't he? So I think...
Yeah, I really don't like the idea of Edwin and Rosa together. Because it feels like it's just undoing what Dickens himself has done in the story. You've got these two people who are engaged because they've been told to. They don't like each other. They're awkward around each other. There's this animosity because of the situation. And then they have that wonderful discussion where they finally open up. They break off the engagement. And in that moment, they are closer than they've ever been before. And they've matured. And so to then go, nah, it's a mistake. Actually, they should be getting together. Like, no, you're missing the point entirely. It's a beautiful moment of them saying, we don't have to do what our father said. We can do what we want to do. And we're happier now. And they go, nah, fathers knew best. Get together. You're all fools. Like, I don't think that's what Dickens is trying to do here.
No, so that's a fail. That's a fail from AI there, isn't it? This is good given the writer's strike and everything. It's good to sort of put AI in its place. I actually think that first one is the best one, and I think they get progressively worse after that. Because in the second version, it says, it was not John Jasper who had orchestrated Edwin's disappearance, but a man named Neville Landless. But then it turns out that it's John Jasper, though, that goes to prison, even though he is apparently innocent. And my favourite line from this, Pete, is Rosa Budd, devastated by the revelation, found solace in the arms of her childhood friend, Deputy.
I know! Where the hell does Deputy come from? As you know, it's...
This demon child that throws stones at everyone, people and animals, and it is very...
Dominic, you and I, we cannot stand in the path of true love, okay? If she wants a demonic stone-throwing child as a true love, who's some 10 years younger than her and not yet hit puberty, and who are we to say that's wrong, okay? Let love, okay?
Yes. So chapter 22, The Discovery. In fairness, I quite liked the opening sentence as a not that good Dickens line.
The town of Cloisterham was shrouded in a heavy fog, as if nature itself mourned the loss of young Edwin Drood.
That's semi-plausible to me as a kind of...
That could work.
But then it seems that Jasper leads a party through the churchyard where Edwin's body is just lying there, not hidden or anything like that, in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Jasper, his face pale and his eyes filled with a mix of dread and determination, led the group deeper into the labyrinthine structure. Amidst the debris and decay, they stumbled upon a sight that would forever haunt their memories. There, lying lifeless and still, was the body of Edwin Drood.
Oh, here's Edwin's body. We missed it. It's here. It's a slight anticlimax there, isn't it?
Yes, and poor Edwin, his once vibrant and youthful countenance now frozen in a mask of eternal silence. Yes. But that is the dialogue between Crisparkle and Jasper, where Crisparkle says, "Oh, Edwin, dear boy, what cruel fate has befallen you? How could such a tragedy come to pass?" Jasper, his voice barely a whisper, spoke with a mixture of anguish and remorse. I never wanted this. Edwin was my nephew, my responsibility. I loved him, and yet I fear I may have played a part in his untimely demise. And that then makes everyone suspect him.
Well, him confessing it makes him suspect him. Who would think such a thing?
Yeah, exactly. So, oh dear.
I think I may have killed him. That sounds suspicious. Yes.
And I'm not even sure if I really properly read the last one, actually, but it's the confession, the judge pronouncing sentence and everything.
I've seen crazier solutions than that as well. Yeah, the AI comes through relatively unscathed.
Sure. A reasonable effort. A reasonable effort from AI. Okay.
Exactly.
But human writers are still top, I think. I think that's fair to say, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
Yes. Oh, gosh. Pete, this has been so good. I've so enjoyed this. Thank you so much for coming back and extending this whole Edwin Drood experience into 2 parts so we could really have a deep dive into it. It's been so enlightening. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And have fun moving at the end of the week.
I hear it's a very stress-free experience. I'm really looking forward to it.
Good. You sound pretty organised, I think. If you felt able to do this interview, you should be pretty much on top of it. So that's great.
Thanks very much. Okay. Thanks, Dominic.
All right. See you soon. Bye now. Thank you for listening to Charles Dickens' A Brain on Fire. If you're enjoying these episodes and would like to make a small donation towards the costs of producing them, please follow the link at the bottom of the description and you can make a donation there. Every coffee you buy makes a huge difference. Thank you ever so much and see you next time.